the dancing for now. I'm gonna notice that I forgot I had this problem on Friday, but Zoom updated and it doesn't always alert me when there's things in the chat. So try to find a way to get my attention if there's something in the chat, maybe use the other reacts if I'm missing it. I'm gonna try to keep it open on the side anyways. So let's go in here. Da, 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 da. Oh, yes. There we go. So a reminder, I'm going to start it right now. We will be recording the class starting now for also any dancers who want to have the recording. So same as the other ones, it'll be up and available for the week for you to review. A reminder, so I gave you the instructions last week for response number 5. It's due tonight at midnight. I also had some questions from some of you asking for another example of like a reading response that has earned 5 out of 5 in the class. So yeah, do you mean the Breakdown Palace maybe? That would be the long one. I'm not sure exactly how many pages. Yeah, because it was like it printed it larger. But yeah, I assigned it because I thought it is great and controversial and thought-provoking, right? And there's many places where we can, I think, like sympathize with the mission, but also you saw how things get messy, right? Yeah, so this image, right, of Mary Barnes, this talented painter, right, actually using her own excrement is the kind of thing, right, that normally you wouldn't have place to break down, even if you were in a like traditional psychiatric hospital, they probably would stop you, right? It's very, very radical to actually allow people the space to do that. So there's one more, what I was going to say is there's one more example. There's an example uploaded under the documents, under resources, which is from one of your peers who earned 5 out of 5. So if you've been wondering, like, I think I'm doing things right, what could I be doing better? There's not only one good way to write a reading response, but this at least gives you one idea. I moved around just a couple things in the schedule on Leia because I realized that since we're doing the writing prep for the final essay today, I didn't want it to be too much longer until you get the actual second half of the paradigm we started last week. So we're going to be like splitting that one over the next 2 classes. And today we're going to focus on how and like good ways to write the final essay, how to structure it, and I'll give you the particular details, exactly like the formal sheet next week. Yeah, so I can see that the chat is still lighting up. Anybody else wants to weigh in, either audio or on chat? Yeah, so one of the things we saw is Mary Barnes' rebirth, right? Which was kind of symbolic and which saw her kind of regressing to a distinct infantile stage, right? And living through it again. So it's interesting that even though anti-psychiatry definitely critiques something like psychoanalysis in many forms, there's still this link to childhood development, right? This kind of idea that part of what might be going well or poorly for a person at any point in their life has to do with infancy, right? Has to do with our childhoods in some way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hopefully it seems like this reading will have stuck with people. Seems not have make use of. It's hard. Yeah. Yeah, it's also like it is from a while ago. We don't have complete reports, right? We don't have all the information. It may be right that, yeah, whatever an underlying condition may be, right? Keep in mind that they wanted to have, right, a space where people could break down, but it didn't necessarily presume there's only one or another cause of it, right? In this viewpoint, right, it's like there's all kinds of ways that we end up emotionally and mentally and being in the world. So I think Mary's story is one among many. Oh gosh, it is so warm in my office right now. I had to close the curtains because the sun is right through there. So, okay. So today, what we're going to focus on is basically how you're going to approach the final essay, which I'll give you the full instructions for next week, and kind of building on many of the things from the first writing workshop, where we focused on really kind of like the fine-grained details, right? So we talked about sentences and punctuation and things like this. So today we're going to talk more about, okay, we're going to get you to write an essay. You're going to write an essay in one form or another. How can we get it to be a good one? I'll give some like general do's and don'ts at the beginning. They're just particular things that are easy to try and remember to do or not do. We're going to talk a little bit about reading an essay prompt. So a lot of the time, especially with essays, students will kind of panic and read it really, really quickly. And they're just like, I don't know. Oh, I see there's like one word that refers me to this topic. I don't know, asylums or something, right? They see that and then they just start to write everything they know about that topic. Asylums, without looking at like what the question's actually asking for. So this is hopefully an anxiety buster. We're going to talk about how one might compare worldviews in an essay. As a reminder, this is a class with topics, but it is providing you with the competency of understanding, comparing, and evaluating different worldviews. So we're gonna like go back to the official, right, on paper, what is the goals of this class and how are we going to show that you have accomplished it? I'm gonna give one really simple essay structure for the final. If you're familiar with other kinds of structures and you find it easy and adept, you can work with those, but I'm gonna offer you one today. We're gonna talk about a good paragraph organization. So keeping one idea per paragraph in the essay. Then we're going to take a little break. We're going to talk about thesis statements, or how you say what you're arguing, or how you say what you're showing in an essay. And we'll have a breakout room activity there. And then I'm going to take you through some more basics of citations and how I'd like you to cite in the final essay. It won't be super complicated. I just want you to get it standardized. So some general don'ts. So sometimes students are trying to like open an essay with a long view of history, and they'll say something like, since the beginning of time, or like for hundreds and hundreds of years, or for all of human history. These are generally not super useful. They're generally not accurate. And they're generally not necessary to the point you're making. It sounds a lot more like a kind of dramatic documentary, which is not the tone we want in your essay, right? I want to know something precise and clear. The other thing that for all of human history does is it falls into the all or always and never trap. So sometimes people start by saying, everyone has always thought that X is a question. I don't know, that madness is a question. Like, well, kind of, like generally we've thought about it, but everyone was ever is not something you can have verified, right? It's not something you can actually go in the world and see everyone at every time. Neither could you prove that no one has ever thought X, Y, Z. So looking for when you use always and never, and these kind of grand openings. Other things, so these might appear early in your essay, they might appear at any point in your essay, saying it's obvious, like it's obvious that people have mental illnesses. It's like, okay, why is it obvious? Why, right? What is obvious about it? So I could say like, it's really obvious that this is a Gatorade bottle, not a Powerade bottle. You might think it's true. I don't know if it's obvious. I don't know, unless you have a strong attachment to like Gatorade or Powerade, you may not have even thought about the label until I picked it up, right? So we need to say which things become obvious. If you say something at any point in any of your essays, like, we have come so far, but we have a lot of work to do on this issue, I'll probably scratch it out because A, this is vague. This doesn't tell me a lot, right? And B, it could appear in many different kinds of essays. So I always want it to be specific to the essay question. This kind of applies to your responses as well, right? So if you've provided a response that was just like, this made me think about the way different ways people are, that's very vague, right? And that also isn't something that's really specific to what we read. That's something that you could put at the end of almost any response. One last thing, so I haven't taken marks for this and I won't take marks for this, but the use of first names alone for authors is generally not professionally used in scholarship. And there's certain tendencies. So sometimes people will indeed use a male author's first name or a masculine name like Joe. But overwhelmingly, if students tend to use first names for women authors and also people of color. So it's also often thought to be like a greater sign of respect if you either use the full name, right, like Joe Smith, or you just use the last name Smith. And most of the time, right, it's because you also like, you don't know these people, right? Like Thomas Saz is not your neighbor, like who you went over to had coffee with before he died. You know, he's not Thomas. So that's kind of like something to watch out for stylistically. Some general do's. Please do indent the first line of every paragraph. It makes it much, much easier in reading than if you have a line of text and there's no indentations. So use the tab button at the beginning of the paragraph. I recommend that you do. So we'll be writing a slightly longer essay than we've written in our short responses so far. But I do recommend that you proofread the essay line by line at least once. I like doing it on printed paper if you have the option of that. But if not, online, that you look things over. So spell checkers are going to miss things. Sometimes you misspell a word as another word, which is a real word, but not the original one. So I've gotten a lot of papers that are about psychologists, which are indeed a thing, but they're not psychologists. It's a different realm of study. So things like this you can definitely easily catch. Yeah, if you mention an example from the text, you should generally give a brief explanation of it. So I think of a good one. Well, like, say you want to mention something about the video that I showed you last week from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And so you're in the middle of your essay and you're talking about why people might want a diagnosis, and you talk about hopefulness or something, right? You say some people might be hopeful, like for example in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, period. And then you go on to a new idea, right? Then you just transition away. And actually the best and clearest writing is always going to assume that the reader, you should imagine that I actually don't, that's a weird saying, imagine that I actually don't know what I taught you, and imagine that you have to provide like a short summary, right? That the person who's reading this actually doesn't know the full context of the class. So if you mention something, you may need to define it, right? Or you may need to explain it. And just generally make your claims as precise and specific as possible. So you agree with the author. Some people say, I agree with the author, period. Okay. Well, you agree with them about what? Usually agree with them that something is the case, but you probably don't agree with them about everything. Maybe not even everything in the piece. So things like that, where it's like, okay, so you agree on what point? On every point? If it is, just say that. And then it'll be a lot clearer. Ooh, As always, please just let me know if the internet is cutting out or there's any other problems. Okay. So in general, when you get an essay prompt, it'll tell you to do something or ask you to do something, right? It'll say, explain, maybe we say I agree to. If you do agree with everything, you can say I agree with everything. But if you just say I agree with the author, then it's not clear what you agree with. Yeah, it's like, it's just not a good point, exactly. It's a better point. Like you could, you're right, but it would be tricky. It's a much better point to pick one thing, even if you agree with all of them, right? You'd be like, I especially agree with this one. I agree with this one the most. I think that's the best one. And then talk about that. Does that make sense? Because, yeah, if you say to everything, you would need to justify to everything, which is why we have longer things like books. So an essay prompt, right, it asks you to do something. Good. It asks you to do something, and it uses verbs for that ask, right? So it'll ask you to like analyze a certain situation, or to explain a certain concept, or to describe an example. And one of the things that you'll be asked to do in this class is to compare and contrast, right? So to note what are the similarities between things and what are the differences, or where two views might agree and where two views might be in conflict. If you can phrase things in terms of making an argument, this is like the next level, and this would be great. We'll go into that in a little more detail. And pay attention to the language that's used in the question and by any of the authors mentioned, right? So if the question is asking you about hysteria and about Freud, and you write an answer that doesn't use the word hysteria anywhere, but uses the word conversion disorder and talks about, I don't know, the characteristics in the DSM for that today. It's an answer, but it's not an answer to what was asked, right? It's actually answering a different question rather than showing off what you already know. So it's not necessarily a trick, right? It's not like, oh my God, this is too easy. It's like, this is the language you know it in. You already have this, so how can you show it off the best? Yeah, and this is where, as I said before, I think, shoot, I forgot to turn on the Zoom subs. Let me find them now. Transcript. There we go. So as I said before, I think this is the place where a lot of anxiety comes in for students, right? Where they get it and they're just like, oh, I don't know, okay, and then they throw it all on the page. So if you look at this, right, you can actually start to think, okay, even in how the question is written, right, there are like clues and hints about how I might construct my essay and about what I'm being asked to do. So often with a compare and contrast, you're gonna have an example of one view in a paragraph, right? Then an example of another view in another. And then something like an assessment, right? A comparison of them in a third. If it's asking you to argue for something, when we make arguments, we give reasons, right? So if I were making an argument, I'd say, okay, I'm gonna argue that ice cream is best enjoyed, ice cream is best enjoyed in summer. Okay, so say I wanna prove that, I need to give some reasons. So I would need at least 2 or 3 reasons, right? I think I'd say, okay, one reason is that in the summer, you really get to feel the difference between the cold ice cream and the hot temperature. So I could have a paragraph about how that's pleasurable in having ice cream, right? And then I could have another paragraph that's like, okay, what's another reason why ice cream is better in summer? Oh, because you can be outside, right? So you can have ice cream when it's -30, but it's not as nice to have it outside. So that'd be my second reason, right? And I could have a third reason, and then I would end the essay by saying, look at all my reasons. Ice cream is so much better in summer. So we're going to be doing more or less the compare and contrast model with some explanations along the way. Let's see. Oh yeah. Worldviews, right? The government requires that you learn certain competencies, and the competencies for this class are about comparing, understanding, making judgments on a worldview. And the final essay, so I'm working out the exact wording, but it's going to ask you to reflect on one of 3 topics that you'll get to pick from. So one is what's the cause or what's the problem of mental distress? I'm going to use this for now. There's no name that is truly neutral to the phenomenon that we're talking about in class. So for now, I'll say mental distress or mental and emotional distress. So you can either choose that, right? In which case you will compare 2 of the worldviews in this course on what they think the cause or the issue is. The second one will be on this very question of naming, right? So maybe you want to argue that it really is actually important that we use the term mental illness, even though it has some drawbacks. And you want to do that by comparing our use of the term mental illness with use of the term madness, right? Or folly, or problems in living. And the third one is going to ask you to reflect on the proposed treatment. So we've seen a few different treatment models, right? We've seen psychoanalytic therapy. We're going to see next week cognitive behavioral therapy. We've seen confinement. We've seen expulsion. And we've seen this kind of alternative community solution provided by anti-psychiatry. So if you pick the third one, you're going to pick two of these treatment models, right? And look at, right, what values they came from, right? What are their benefits? What are their costs? So that's one reason why I keep showing you this little table, like a cheat sheet at the beginning of the last several units, right? It's kind of a shorthand to, okay, how can we think about these in conversation with one another? It's so warm in here. Okay. Yes, so the final wording, the official wording is coming next week. But you can start thinking about it, right? Maybe there's one of these topics that you really are passionate about or you have a strong connection to already. Yeah. Emphasize the world viewiness. So a worldview, right, is this relationship, kind of network between beliefs, attitudes, practices, and ideas, so that every view of madness we've seen is linked in some way, right, to the time, the space, the society in which it arose. So we can think about, right, what were the preceding values that some of these people were reacting to? So the psychoanalysts were certainly reacting to older modes of psychiatry. The anti-psychiatrists were reacting to, in part, the psychoanalysts. And to understand that these form kind of large bodies or large unities, right? It's not that we can like pick up a worldview and move it to another place in time, or even pick up a person and move them to another place or time. Their worldview of what madness or mental distress is will likely change, right? This is kind of the fun thing about time travel movies. So it will ask you in the prompt next week that I will give you for the final essay to specify things like, right, what is the relationship sort of between things? So we think back to Freudian psychoanalysis, right? And we have this long history already of hysteria, which is fed into it. We have quite a bit of gender inequity, right? We have the sort of middle class situation of Vienna, right? All kind of colliding to provide the space for which, right, Freud develops his theories and someone like Dora is treated. So that, yes, we know that were Dora in another time or place, she likely would have been treated differently. So yeah, just keep in mind, even if sometimes you're like, oh, I'm so tired of worldviews, it's like, yeah, use that language when you can, because it will reflect. It's the easiest way to prove to anybody who says, hey, why did they do well on this essay? Look at how much they really understood the worldviews, right? Look at how they tried to understand and immerse themselves even in views that are really, really, really different from what we think about today, right? That's my speech on worldviews, I guess. Oh. So probably for your reading responses, you haven't made an outline, nor do you necessarily need to, because they are quite short, right? Usually they're like 2, maybe 3 paragraphs. So this essay will probably be a little bit longer than that, right? You'll probably have an introduction, 1 or 2 paragraphs on one worldview, 1 or 2 paragraphs on another, and then you provide your information. So I really think it's in your best interest to make an outline, even if it's just like, I don't know. Let me see. One, intro to medieval demons. 3, psychoanalysis, ego tension. 4, why I think both are wrong. Sorry, I'm writing you a dummy. So even if the outline you write looks like this, right? It's just like 1, introduction, 2, something about medieval. So in this imaginary one, I'm writing about the causes. So I wrote medieval demons. All right, psychoanalysis, ego tension, number 3. Number 4, why I think both are wrong. So even if your outline is really simple like this, I really think that getting it down either on physical paper or on the computer is really, really helpful. Even if you end up throwing it away, even if you end up like writing things in another order, it just gets you started. And you should think about what you might need to explain first. So sorry, I used part of this in my other class, which we were discussing sex and gender, but if there's any terms or definition or context, right? Remember, we're imagining this reader who actually knows less than I do. What kinds of things might you need to explain that would be obvious to someone who's read all this stuff, but wouldn't be obvious otherwise, right? What things do you need to tell me, right, about the fact that anti-psychiatry also, right, gained its biggest foothold in the 60s and 70s when there was a lot of other social change and modes of alternative living going on, right? So if there's terms, definitions, or special context, right, that this imaginary reader who knows some things, but not everything we've read in the class would need. Yeah. Yeah. And pay attention to both the order and to linking ideas and examples. So sometimes people tend to go really quickly from one idea or another, or one example to another, without explaining kind of what is the role of that example or how this idea relates to the next. So you always, it's better to like scoop out as much of your thinking process and put it on the page to make it obvious for the reader. It's so warm. Okay. So this is my proposed structure for your final essay. You are not beholden to this structure. If you want to do an experimental structure and it goes badly, that is part of your own choice. And if you want to do an experimental structure and it goes well, that is also part of your own choice. But this is, and I'm going to specify more on the assignment sheet next week, this is what I'm looking for from you. An introductory paragraph. It should contain a thesis statement, which we're going to talk about after the break. And give me some preview of what you will do in the essay. Not just, I will discuss the idea of madness. It tells me about what you're going to discuss, but something more specific, like I will discuss how the idea of madness has fluctuated over time. That gives me content, right? Not just an idea of what move you're making. So then I'd like to see, right, 1 or 2 paragraphs on one of the worldview's answers. So those answers, right, were like, what's the problem, or what's the treatment, or what should we call it? So 1 or 2 paragraphs with pick your favorite or least favorite worldview. Right? Talk about the context, talk about strengths and weaknesses of the proposal, right? So you might say, like, hey, there actually are some strengths to like confinement. You can keep people in one place and keep a track on them, but there's a whole lot of weaknesses as well. So you'll do that for one worldview. You'll integrate in there any examples you want from the readings we've had in class. And you're going to link it then and contrast it to another worldview. Do the exact same thing. Then after both of those, I would like to see your own take on those 2 proposals. So I don't know, pretend somebody comes to you on behalf of both of these worldviews, right? And they say, okay, this is the case for anti-psychiatry saying we should call this problems in living or suffering. And this is the case for our current paradigm, which says we should call it mental illness. And you're the judge, right? So you're like, do I think this one really wins? Do I think this one really wins out? Are neither of them good? Do we need some sort of combination or negotiation, right? Do we need to invent a new treatment model or a new way of naming things? So all of those are potential answers, right, that can be in this section I'm calling synthesis. And that's where we get to see, right, your strength in comparing them, in showing off their differences, and also your own opinion, right? It's so warm. Yeah, this will also be on the instruction sheet next week. I wish there were more writing centers and there were more writing centric classes. And it's likely that in a few years, if you do further study, someone will be like, forget ever writing an essay this way. But sometimes it's the easiest way to get everything done. Okay, woo, we're almost at the break. So that's good. It's gorgeous. I hope some of you are outside. So
I'm sick.
Are you sick? Yeah, I heard someone in my Friday class had COVID.
Yeah, I think I have COVID too.
Oh no. Yeah. Hydrate. And the other thing is since last Monday, I know that Ramadan started. So if there's anybody who is fasting, Godspeed. You're doing the tough stuff. So, okay, a paragraph, then we're going to take a break. So a good paragraph starts with an opening sentence that sort of shows you the main topic and stance of the paragraph and how it relates to the essay overall. It should contain just one main idea for a paragraph and use the sentences within to give reasons, evidence, examples. And it should ideally finish with a clear concluding sentence that both tells me what was just said and links everyone to the next paragraph. This is my dummy paragraph I wrote, which I kind of hate, but it illustrates the purpose. So if you take a look at this, I have an opening sentence, and it tells me that Montreal is bustling and cultural even during a global pandemic. So you can read that and you say, okay, so what they're going to do in this paragraph is provide me evidence to say, okay, it's still like bustling and there's lots of culture. And if you look, right, what I've got in like the sandwich portion of the paragraph are different facts and reasons and evidence about how the cultural performance sphere in Montreal has changed, right? So I have examples, right? That, well, the cultural life includes things like outdoor street festivals, which were canceled, but also the sidewalk sales, which were on last summer. That the ability to have things performed online is both because of a problem, but sometimes more convenient, right? And then I give some examples about outdoor performances. So I end, right, with like, in all these ways, the cultural life of Montreal has been maintained since March of last year. So it's kind of a boring paragraph. I don't know if I agree, but it has good bones in that it has one main idea that it's demonstrating to us, right? And so if you were going on from there, maybe pretend it's a compare and contrast essay like the one we're working on. Maybe my next paragraph would be, in contrast, the tourism industry in Montreal has suffered greatly during the pandemic, right? So I use an opener like in contrast to signal that the next thing is going to be way different, right? And that's the same way you'd use however, or on the other hand, or sometimes unfortunately, right? To signal to the reader, we're finished with that idea and there's a new one coming. Yeah. So this is exactly what I just said. Always do this. Yeah. If you're giving 3 reasons for something, you won't be in this class necessarily, but it's always good to be like, the first reason is, the second reason is, the third reason is. It may be repetitive, but it's clear, right? So always making sure that I know all of a sudden, okay, why are you talking about this particular thing here when you were just talking about this other topic, right? Explain why they're related. Okay. Woo! So I'm going to start a 5-minute break. I'm gonna go drink some more water out of this hot room. Yeah, if you have an opportunity to get outside and you can, do that. Otherwise, maybe drink some water, do some stretches, get a snack. I'll see how they are. Get a cat. There we go. Yeah. Good. Yeah, she's a real handful. All right. Hopefully everybody's okay there. Whew. So we're gonna talk just a couple minutes about thesis statements. And then I'm gonna put you all in a breakout room for like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, as long as it takes you to do the thing. Oh, are you gonna stretch? Good. So, a thesis statement is a statement of the main argument that you, as the author of the essay, are outlining. So actually, you're probably doing this all the time when you don't think you're making an argument, but you could be making an argument, right? So even if I'm just saying that right? I think asylums are bad and people should go to inpatient therapy instead. I'm making an argument. And that's something that I can give reasons for, right? Reasons for why I don't prefer the first, reasons for why I do prefer the second, and why we should choose one. So a strong thesis, right? It's specific and it's precise and it's able to be demonstrated. So that means if you're making an argument about something we can never really know or verify, it's not going to be as good an argument, right? If you're like, okay, I argue that there's a flying spaghetti monster out there and he's the one who makes us all go crazy. I'm like, okay, but like, what are your reasons for that, right? What reasons could we have for or against it? So a strong thesis, right, is going to ask the reader to take a position and it can be supported with evidence. A weak thesis might be something like, oh, it's just the case that people will always be crazy. Like, what does that mean? What do you mean by crazy? What do you mean always? You probably don't mean always. Oh my gosh, she's so heavy. Right? You need to make sure that you're specific about it there. What is my last line? I'm losing it. Yeah. You can revise any thesis statement you make. So you can make a thesis statement that's like, ice cream sucks, right? If your thesis statement was, ice cream sucks because it is drippy, it's too full of sugar, and it's too full of fat. That's already better. And that helps me know already what kinds of reasons you're going to be giving within, right? So it's like a clue to the reader about what's going to come. Okay, she's obsessed with stretching like this. Now I just have to hold her. Okay, so here's one example of a thesis statement you might write. Actually, this is not one to improve, I think, although we can take a look at it. No, I think this would be a fairly good one. Right, so in this essay, I will compare two proposals for naming mental and emotional distress, which are mental illness and problems in living. I will then argue that mental illness as we name it today should be supplemented with an understanding about problems in living. So if you have a statement or a couple of sentences like this in your introduction, I'm going to be very pleased. It's going to make it much easier to kind of trace where you're going and what you mean. So even this one could probably be revised. Okay, you're getting too wild now. To be a little bit clearer and one sentence if we wanted to. But as it stands, I think it's okay. So you could say in this essay, I will argue that both calling mental distress mental illness and calling it problems in living are themselves inappropriate, but a combination of the two would be supportive to people who suffer. So that's a longer sentence, but it's one sentence, right? Which still tells me both of the views you're looking at and the stance you're going to take. It's like a sauna in this damn room. Oh, I'm sorry about the pets, folks. Pets are really nice. So I am now going to send you all into breakout rooms to practice modifying. Escape, get out of there. To practice revising thesis statements. So basically what I want you to do is with your group, okay, I said 15. If you're done in 10, we can do it in 10. With your group, revise the assigned thesis statement. So I've given you a statement that's kind of like an argument, but it's not super clear or well developed, and just try to make it better. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's only being graded for your preparation and participation, not for your answers. And if you don't know anything about the topic, right? So like one of them says Shakespeare, you can make up something about Shakespeare for the purposes of today's in-class activity, just to make something specific. I do suggest you be as specific as possible. Avoid things like seems, maybe, feels like. Ask why, what, and how. So you can take a look. Oh, whoops, I forgot to put stronger version in this one. Stronger version. Yeah, and your task is just to make it a little bit better. So I'm going to put you all into the breakout rooms. The class is so small tonight, I guess because we're recording now. Where's the breakout rooms? I'm gonna stop this for a second. Where are your breakout rooms? There we go. Okay, as always, I will be in the main room. I will be hovering around in the Google Slides. Let's see if we can make these statements better. There we go, now I could. There. Oh, open. Gosh. Oh.
What's up, B? What is that? Long time. Yo, it's me, Chris. Oh my god. I've been listening to class. Oh. Dang. Okay, then what's room 3? Two, 2, 3. Okay. This necessary give you also reasons why slot machines. Oh, what is this? What's a stronger version? Do we just have to like rephrase it to make it better? Slot machines. Yeah. Oh man, going to class, it's so tiring after work. I need that money. The regrets. I heard that. Hey, at least you have a car. Do you drive? Oh my goodness. In Baltimore. Where is Baltimore? Where's Baltimore? It's a place. Yes. There's that. I know. It's in the US. Okay. Should we? Well, we can just like just say this. Oops. Oh, I'm tired. Okay. This essay will give you many reasons why casinos should not legalize slot machines and more. Yeah, it works. Yeah, it works. Oh, my back. Um, I work in a pharmacy, so like you always get yelled at old people. It is. Well, I work I work in a pharmacy as a pharmacist, cashier, and sometimes as a store clerk. So right now, well, today I was working with boxes. Boxes. With Uncle Chi, man. Yeah. No, I just got home from work. I mean, there's food here in the house, but it's okay. I have. Huh? I know I have to eat, but like, it, I'm too lazy, man. I'm too lazy to go out of the room. Nah, I'm too nice for that. I'm too nice. Oh, I haven't done anything since day one. Yeah. Nothing. I just did some quizzes and yeah, that's it. That's all I did. You know why? I can't read anymore. I'm tired of reading. Yeah, right. I can't read anymore. So like, yeah, I'm probably failing this class, but I like this class really. I just now. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Cat. It's mm, yeah. I don't even know what to write anymore because I try reading and then I go to Word and just like stare at it. At some point, like okay, never mind. I give up. I give up. I guess I'm gonna fail this class, but it's alright. At least I'm learning something. Even though I'm failing. This is so bad. No, I have two more. Wait, two more? Wait, no. This is my first year. Actually, 2 more years, actually. Yeah. Yeah. This is my second semester. Yeah. Even though I was like having a hard time, like literally having a lot of hard time. Are you in academic probation though? Wait, so you weren't in Venice? Oh yeah, in French school. English. Last? Oh wait, what are you taking? Social science, right? You're- Oh my god. Okay, okay. Oh my god. I think I'm feeling two classes. Mm. Like this class and anthropology. Because anthropology, it's asynchronous. And what do we learn? Nothing except writing, well, essays, short essays. But I still don't do anything because, yeah, we don't learn anything, man. Like, oh, read this chapter and then answer questions from it. What the fuck? What's up? Right? Can we just like drop out? I want to drop out. I'll drop out. Mm, 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 mm. Oh, what did she do? What did she do? She did this? Or no? She just says it would give you many reasons. Like I see should not legalize like machines about many reasons. I can't think anymore. Uh, um, will give you. This essay will give you. Will give you. Um. Yeah, but lot, only one. Um. um, Whoa! Look at group four.
looks like everybody's back. Let's do a quick debrief about the thesis statements. Yeah, and a brush. The one called Ferminator is pretty good. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So let's go over these thesis statements, right? I think the best thing to do is always to keep it to just a couple of sentences, and to focus on this, like, getting clear to the point. So hey, do not scratch the new chair. Don't do that. I'm gonna just go in and change things. Yeah. So this one, you started out like good, and you added, yeah, there's a bunch of brushes for that, and it also just helps cut down on the shedding a little bit. So you've added some Shakespeare details, but you got away from the human nature a little bit, right? So I think there's a way that you would be able to integrate human nature in the first one. I would do something like Shakespeare's plays both reveal human nature in social interactions and make you feel like you're living in a fairy tale or a fantasy world, because now here, right, you started with plays and then you only have it is, but it's actually plural, right? Because they are. Because the they here goes with plays, right? Because they are so unique and pure. So this is okay, right? This kind of hints to me that what you're going to do in the essay is talk about two things. Talk about one, how they reveal human nature in social interactions. And then two, talk about how it feels like you're living in a fairy tale. So that gives me an idea, right? If you were having an essay, what the structure is going to be as I keep reading. Let's see this one. Aha. Yeah, this one was hard. So we need other options, right? Is a thing that people say, and it kind of helps, but it kind of doesn't help, right? Because what kinds of other options? There could be any, right? So we need other options because seniors shouldn't carry their own garbage. Good, but if we're going to have the options early on in the sentence, we need to know, what do you mean options for, right? So do we need more people who carry garbage? Do we need more options for garbage disposal, like those old-fashioned laundry chutes, you know, where you just like throw it in a drawer on the wall? Maybe we need garbage chutes, right? So the other options, right, would be where I would develop it into, like, we need to develop alternative garbage disposal systems such as chutes, because seniors shouldn't carry their own garbage. And then you could even talk about the rising population of seniors with the baby boomers, right? So that this other options get spelled out, right? Like, what the heck does other options mean? Right? Maybe the other option is that seniors keep their garbage inside and it just smells. That doesn't seem like a good option, even though it is one. So there's a start. This essay will give multiple reasons on why casinos. This is where I said, like, you can kind of make things up, right? So you could say, like, you could actually keep the beginning. You could keep it in this essay, but what you want to say is, this essay will argue that casinos should not legalize slot machines in Baltimore as they lead to an increase, I'm just going to make stuff up, in mob crime and in armed robberies, right? So again, here what we're doing is we're making something more specific, right? Lots of reasons. Okay, I have lots of reasons why I like ice cream in summer. But what are those, right? I need to like have a hint of what they are. So if we add this little bit at the end, right? These two reasons which I made up, I know nothing about Baltimore. Then I can guess, right? Okay, there's at least two topics you're going to talk about in relation to slot machines, right? Mob crime and armed robbery. So the good thesis statement is like foreshadowing and kind of predicting for the reader. Oh, good. So this group did a couple versions, right? One in which like it's cool to have a paragraph all about all the global warming things, like how I had a paragraph about the Montreal things, right? I would even like, if I kept to this version, I would cut out most of this, right? And I would probably say something, we have to do something now, and we can. And then give some examples of the ways, right? Instead of like, there are many things that can be done right now, I tried to put the right now and the can into the earlier part, right? Strongest version. The earth is going through we must eat the rich. Yes. So you might want to say, right, in this essay, I will argue that we must eat the rich. Eat the rich due to severe climate change being caused by big companies who only make up, right, 10% of the population. And then I would even like to see a little bit more about why we should eat the rich. And the only solution is their extinction, something like this, right? So that we get, right, what you're going to bring us to at the end, right? The eating, and we get your reasons, right? So that is about these big companies. They're only 10%. Maybe you're like a utilitarian and you think that the benefits will be worth it. In any case, right? Both of these are improvements on global warming is scary and we should avoid it. Which doesn't say what's scary, which doesn't say why we should avoid it or how we should avoid it. Right? Maybe I say like, it's scary, so I'm going to go to therapy so I'm less scared about it. That doesn't make a lot of changes, right? This is pretty good, Roxanne and Jean-Simon. I think there's a couple more spaces where you could specify things, right? So it's good, right? You talked about Donald Trump and his specificity, just in case maybe the reader actually doesn't know that he was president of the United States. Plethora is like a little bit fancy. Like you don't necessarily need to use plethora. You could say many or various, but it would be okay. So you carried out a plethora of questionable decisions and behaviors. It would be really good to, and you say that these are acts that could lead to his impeachment, right? But maybe you want to say, notably, right? Maybe you want to pick one or two things. So intensified immigration restrictions and I don't know, whatever. And undoing Obamacare or something like that, right? No sad animal killing videos in any class communication. And yeah, I like that you pointed to the kinds of things he did are things that are impeachable, right? but you do still need to have some content in there. So I wonder, it would be like notably intensified. You could even make this essay, right, which should have led to his impeachment, since in fact he was like kind of impeached twice, but also not, right? So by the time we get here, we're night and day away from Donald Trump did all kinds of bad things as a president. Well, like, what kinds of bad things? Why should I care about these bad things? What's going on, right? Last group didn't quite get there. But the dummy sentence is, right, we should not have to write essays in CEGEP. A better version would give some reasons why essays aren't an accurate, there's some pretty good beyond meats as well, are not an accurate measurement of intelligence or something, right? So you'd say like, in this essay, I will argue that CEGEP students should be exempted from writing essays as they do not capture what we learn in class and they are not useful afterwards or something, right? So you've given me, right, what your overall message is, right? We shouldn't have to write essays in CEGEP. Then we've got two reasons already, right? They don't capture what we learned in class and they're not useful. So all of these are ways in which you can think about your own thesis statement, which for your final essay will look something like, you know, in this essay, that sucks, Alex, but it's good. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, your thesis statement for the final will look something like, in this essay, I will argue that allowing those with hallucinations and delusions to break down in a community living space is preferable to confining them in a hospital or something, right? So that's basically what your argument's going to look like in one form or another with different examples. Yeah, and if you can phrase it as like you're making an argument, it will be gold. So in the final essay, I would like to see you use, right, examples, ideas from different authors that we've read in class. So maybe you want to choose ones from the readings you understood the best, or the ones that you wrote, your reading responses on. And I want to give you just like really simple ways to cite it. So if what we read, most of what we read, is like articles, short texts, selections, like chapters from books, right? Encyclopedia entries. And so in your writing, just put quotation marks around it. Tell me what year it came out. And that's it. If you're citing a book or a movie, so a few people have cited movies in their reading responses, but they don't tell me what year it came out or the title's not clear. So make sure that if it's a movie or a book, you write it in italics with the year. And if you quote an author, direct quotation, you should provide at the end of the text author, and actually I don't want a comma there, but that's fine. If there's a comma there, I won't mark you wrong. If you have the author's name and the page number somewhere within brackets at the end of the sentence, right before the period, I won't take marks for that, and it's easy enough for me to read. And if there's no page numbers, so for example, Breakdown Pouts, the long piece that we had on Kingsley Hall, it has section labels, right? So if there's no page numbers, use the labels for the sections or the subtitles. This is just showing you how, if you're doing an in-text citation, you do it, right? So if you want to quote something, here you want to quote blah, 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 is from the author Douglas on page 2. In the text, put it like this. That's what you need in the brackets. I don't need the year if you're quoting. I only need the year if you're like talking about a whole book or a whole movie. So that's most of what you'll have to do. If you do want to bring in an outside source, so occasionally it's not necessary to bring in an outside source, but you might want to if you want to disagree with something that's not presented in what we read. So keep in mind that first and foremost, your job is to show off what we've learned in class, to show off how well you know the world we use. But if you want to bring in an outside source, it's possible. You should follow this format. You can cite Twitter posts, yes. So I can provide you with a website that's called the Purdue Owl. Yeah, sure. And there's different ways. There's also ways to cite YouTube videos. But the most common things you might want to cite, right, are either from a book or from a journal article. So I've got examples right here. It's really simple. These are things that I will mark up for you, but I won't you can't cite the lecture or the slides. That is a no-no. But yeah, what was I going to say? Yes. So you must make an effort at a works cited if you bring in an outside source. But if you don't figure out which city it was published in, I'll be okay. I'm not going to remove marks for that. We generally don't remove marks. We generally start at 0 and move up. So that's the most basic citation. If you cite anything we read in class, it can just be the author's and page number, right? So Foucault, 431, Saz, 6, right? Freud, 14, whatever. And you won't need to tell me the titles unless there's 2 by the same author. Yeah, this website, Purdue Owl, it's really, really excellent citation resource. It's much easier to look it through than a lot of the online handbooks. Oh, we're at the end of class. Oh my God. Okay. So there is a short quiz on this workshop. It's on Microsoft Forms under documents for this week. And it is graded, but it is open book about today's class, basically, and the slideshow. There's a short video for you to watch to start prepping us for next week on the invention and or discovery of psychiatric drugs, psychopharmaceuticals, and the development of psychopharmacology. And then there's a short, it's like a newspaper opinion piece on the narrative of chemical imbalance in the brain causing mental illness, which was very popular scientifically at a certain point in the 50s and 60s. It's not generally supported nowadays, but it remains in the sort of public shared psyche. We have this thought about a chemical imbalance in the brain. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about next time. That's it for today. Are there any questions, concerns? Remember to take a look at the schedule, do these couple of things, go outside before curfew if you have a chance. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to hang out in case there's any other questions. I will be uploading the recording tonight or in the morning at the very latest, because I know at least one person, you said you had to, your internet cut out. Oh, so tired. Okay, thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Miss.